Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I'd like to talk about dispositors and how they affect really everything in a chart and what's going on in the transits that are happening in the world right now and in the future. So what is a dispositor? First of all, a dispositor is the planet that rules the sign another planet's in. So let me give you an example. If we have Mars transiting in Gemini, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. So therefore, Mercury is the dispositor of Mars. So you see, you have to know what planets rule each of the signs. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to figure out the dispositors. So once you have that pat down, but the thing is that also remember in Vedic astrology, we do not use Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto as rulers. So we use the old rulerships, such as Mars rules Scorpio, and Saturn rules Aquarius, and Jupiter rules Pisces. So we do not use the outer planets as rulers. But once you figure out all the dispositing planets in a chart, it makes so much sense why things are happening. Because I always look at the dispositors that explain to me why something's happening. So if a planet is in a particular sign, then whatever house their dispositing planet is in will give the rhyme and reason why an event is happening, what it's caused from. Because here's the thing, the dispositing planet is like the soul of that planet, what makes that planet operate. So if you have Mercury in Aries, then it's ruled by Mars. And Mars, it's fiery, first of all, Mercury being in Aries, the way you communicate, the way you talk, but being wherever Mars is, not just by what sign Mars is in, but also what house it's in, will give the rhyme and reason why events occur according to the relationships of what's happening with the natal Mercury. So let's say your Venus is in Aries or Scorpio. That would mean Mars is the disposing planet, and Mars is pretty much passionate. But if you have Mars in Virgo, let's say you have your Venus in Scorpio, which is very passionate. Mars is the dispositing planet, but let's say that Mars goes to Virgo. That person isn't going to be overtly passionate because Virgo's very reserved. And it's kind of prudish. So you're going to think, well, what happened to that passion of Venus being in Scorpio? It depends on where Mars goes in terms of it being the dispositing planet. Now, another thing I always think about is where the planets are transiting. What are their dispositing planets? Such as Jupiter being in the sign of Scorpio for this entire year. Transiting Jupiter went into Scorpio October of 2018, and it pretty much remains in that sign till November of 2019. So Jupiter stays in a sign per year. And whatever sign its dispositing planet, whatever it's doing, will dictate what's happening for a whole year through the power of Jupiter. So Jupiter being in Scorpio means Mars is the dispositor. But you see, every 6 weeks to 2 months, Mars will change signs. And this will change the energy of Jupiter and what to expect throughout the whole time that Jupiter is in Scorpio. So we had Mars in 2019 in the sign of Gemini between I happen to know this one, around May 4th till June 24th, that Mars was in Gemini. So because Jupiter's in Scorpio it's going to give the results of this Mars in Gemini. So talking about communication problems, travel problems, and not to mention there was so much going on in Gemini anyway because the eclipses are happening there. But still, you're going to see the remnants of the reason why things are happening is in reference to the dispositing planet of Jupiter, which is Mars. And every time it changes signs, it changes what's going on out there in the world. So it's interesting though when the dispositing planet is the moon, because the moon moves so fast. It changes signs every 2.5 days. So when you find the moon is the dispositing planet, that means things change a lot quite quickly because the moon changes signs so quickly. So there's a whole feel and an energy that changes. Now I wanted to just show you in a birth chart how dispositors work, because I mean we can have all this visualized in our head, but until you see it is not till you understand it. So I wanted to put the chart up of old-time great movie star Doris Day. And the reason why I'm using Doris Day, she just passed away. She passed away, I believe it was May 13th. She was 97 years old. She was always in movies in the 60s. I mean, with I think she was with Cary Grant, but I know Rock Hudson and her did all sorts of silly movies together, and you know, they were fun, but I think one was called like Pillow Talk. It was just really goofy, funny movies. But she was, back in the day that she was an actress, you had to be multi-talented. You could not just act. You had to sing and you had to dance. You had to have it all. And she did. She was a great singer, she was a great dancer, and she was a great actress. And one thing about her personal life, the reason why I have such interest in Doris Day, I have to tell you this little snippet because it's fun. Well, it's not fun, but I love to know about people that have these great psychic powers, which she did. Now, she was very religious and she was very clean. She didn't smoke, she didn't drink, and that was saying a lot back in those days because everybody pretty much smoked and drank in the 50s and the 60s, but she didn't. She was very pure, very clean, but she was very, very intuitive. And her son was Terry Melcher, who was the manager of the Beach Boys, and very successful, but one of the Beach Boys, Dennis, got hooked up, unfortunately, with Charles Manson. And Charles Manson was delusional. He thought he was going to be a rock star. And he wrote music. I mean, he was out of his mind. But somehow he latched on to Dennis Wilson, one of the Beach Boys, and they would meet over at Terry Melcher's house. So Charles Manson knew where Terry Melcher lived. Well, Terry Melcher, Doris Day's son, didn't want anything to do with this nut and, you know, cut off the ties and everything. But his mother said, "You have to move from your house. I don't know what it is, but I have a premonition that something horrible is going to happen at your house. You've got to move, no ifs, ands, or buts." And he did. Guess who moved in? You got it, Sharon Tate. Yes. And it is believed that this whole thing was Charles Manson trying to get back at Doris Day's son because he didn't make Charles Manson a star. It was all about that. But my whole point is this woman was so intuitive and she was such a talented person. So let's put her chart up. Let's see what's going on in this incredible woman's chart, Doris Day. And she was born April 3rd, 1922. And she was born around 4:30 p.m. in Cincinnati, Ohio. Her ascendant is Virgo. And when I look at a chart, I always look at the ruler of the ascendant, whatever house it goes to. So that's really the dispositing planet for the chart. So her ascendant ruler is Mercury, and it goes to the 7th house of her marriage partners. Now, she wasn't so lucky in marriage. She was married more than once, to say the least. But if you'll notice where her Mercury goes to Pisces. And initially would think, oh, that's debilitated. That's not good. It's weak. But let me show you something. What rules Pisces? Jupiter. So the dispositing planet of Mercury is Jupiter. And then when you hop over to where Jupiter is, which is in the 1st house, so anytime you have planets connected to the 7th house and in the 1st house, or the ruler of the 7th and the 1st, you give relationships your all. And they are vitally important in your life. Relationships are everything. You really focus your life and everything you do through, if it's okay with your partner. You want to make them happy. But notice when you hop off to Mercury, Mercury's dispositing planet is Jupiter, because Mercury is in Pisces and Jupiter rules Pisces. When you go to Jupiter, Jupiter's in Virgo. What rules Virgo? Mercury. So you see, Mercury and Jupiter are in each other's signs of rulership. So they exchange dispositors pretty much. And that connects these planets powerfully. And actually, the way that these planets manifest their energy is it makes it like Jupiter is in Pisces and Mercury is in Virgo, and then these two planets become incredibly powerful because it's like they're in, Mercury is exalted in Virgo and Jupiter is in its own sign in Pisces. So you see how this dispositorship exchanges and empowers these two planets. Now, when I talk about entertainers, I talked about how talented she was. When I think about entertainers, I always look to the 3rd house and the 5th house. 3rd house is really creativity. And the dispositing planet of the 3rd house, let's go to the 3rd house in her chart. Look, it's Mars in her 3rd house. And Mars is in Scorpio. So what is the dispositing planet of Mars? It disposits itself. It's in its sign of rulership. This makes this planet incredibly strong and powerful. So therefore, she is talented. And so when we go to the 5th house is the 3rd from the 3rd. That's why it deals with creativity. And the 5th house ruler being Saturn. It goes to her 1st house with Jupiter. So her talents, it goes to the 1st house, which represents her. So you see, this is how it works. And even Doris Day has her moon in the 10th house. I talk about this all the time, that when a planet is in the 10th house, it can, and especially the moon. Now the moon is the public, the moon is the masses, it's the people. When a moon's in the 10th house, it can represent fame. She was vastly famous. The moon is in Gemini. What rules Gemini? Mercury. So it diverts back to the Mercury in the 7th house. And the 7th house deals specifically with partnerships. So I'm sure she might have got involved in her partners through her work and through her reputation. And then again, maybe they work together, but one way or another, this connection between the moon and Mercury, and then Mercury goes back and forth with Jupiter. You see how these planets are all connected through dispositors. And this is the reason why. And here's one more thing I might add. When natal planets are triggered by transiting planets or the dashas, the reason why something's occurring, the focus, the reason will be through the dispositing planet. So therefore, when, let's say, transiting Jupiter aspects her moon in Gemini, which is in her 10th house. Because the moon is in Gemini, Mercury becomes triggered in the 7th house, which would mean when Jupiter aspects the moon, you'd say, okay, your career is taking off. But because Mercury is the dispositing planet in the 7th house, that could be a time that she meets her new partner or falls in love. Why? Because the moon disposits to the 7th house. So with that, I'd like to close. I just wanted to give you an idea of how to work with dispositors and how important they are. They're the soul of a planet. What makes a planet do and be what it is. That's the dispositing planet. Don't ever forget to look at them. They're everything as to the soul and essence of a chart. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like to learn more about me, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. Or if you would like to learn Vedic astrology, go to my university website, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.